Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. For those of you, if there's a few of you who are still unfamiliar with Hopin, if you would like to increase the size of the slide deck on your screen, all you need to do is double click right in the middle of them and they should enlarge accordingly. And also, we welcome questions at any time this morning. You can put them through the chat feature. I'll try to keep my eye on it and answer questions as they arise, but if I fail to do that, we'll sort of circle back at the end. I am Jann Eichlersmith, and I am Director of the Social Enterprise Division at Venn Foundation. Jamie Glover of ASSIA is joining me this morning, and I'm going to formally introduce her a little bit later on as we get ready to learn more about ASSIA and the PRI that it used. A little background about Venn Foundation, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. We are a 501c3 public charity with a mission to unleash the power of program-related investments to advance charitable impact. We do this by bringing flexible, below market rate investment capital to all types of organizations in all sectors that are advancing charitable purposes. And similar to many of you, Venn is still a bit of a startup. Jeff Oak started testing out the idea and trying out various pilot projects back in 2016 and formally organized the entity in 2018. I and a few others joined Jeff in just April of this year. Now, before jumping in on the detail of program-related investments, I think it might be helpful just to review a bit of background. It will come as no surprise to you, and I'm sure many of you have already seen this slide, but there is one very large systemic unmet need for early-stage entrepreneurs, and that is capital. And this is true for all entrepreneurs. Time and time again, we're finding that for-profit investors are saying no, and they're saying no to investing for really good reasons. The risks are too high, the expected returns are too low, it takes too long to liquidity, or simply more profitable opportunities exist. This, saying no leads to an unmet need for below market capital. And this unmet need is particularly strong for social enterprises. And the reason why here is that so many investors are still struggling to make sense of social enterprises. There's a disconnect in their mind between maximizing profit and maximizing social impact. We're seeing this starting to change. I think the creation of public benefit corporations certainly are helping that to change. And on the other end of the startup spectrum, large international publicly traded companies are beginning to realize and change the way they go about doing their business to be considering people and planet in addition to just profits. And so we're starting to see that change a little bit. And as these investors are beginning to think in a revised framework way, seeing that the financial return and the social impact can work together, they are also beginning to rethink capital. Now, traditionally, we've all thought of capital in pretty separate spheres, two of them. One of them, charitable donations. These are where we give our money away through grants or gifts. I think of these as our doing good dollars. And the other sphere is for-profit investments. This is where we intentionally put our dollars into other investments with the intention of growing the pot of our dollars to further whatever we're trying to further forward. This separate thinking, though, where these two separate spheres leave a couple of groups in the gap. First, it leaves social enterprises, startup social enterprises in the gap, those that need this below market capital. And second of all, it leaves the individuals and the businesses and entities that want to use their doing good dollars in a different way besides just giving them away, really unsatisfied. There is, however, the possibility of a third type of capital where these two spheres intersect. This is a third type of capital known as a program-related investment, and it is a below market rate investment that advances charitable purposes. These were created by the Tax Reform Act of 1969, so they're virtually 50 whatever odd years old. They've long been used by national private foundations like Ford, Heron, MacArthur, and Gates, among many others. They've been used to effectively launch the microfinance movement, advance research for orphan drugs, and provide affordable housing. So they've done really, really amazing good things, but they remain broadly underutilized. And you may be wondering why. Well, first, individuals and businesses cannot directly make a program-related investment. And while public charities and donor-advised funds and foundations can, there are many practical challenges that get in their way. And so they're not commonly used. And that is something that Ben is trying to correct. PRIs are a fabulous tool. Not only do they meet these unmet needs for below market rate capital and the needs of individuals that want to make their doing good dollars leverage and do more good than ever before, but they are extremely flexible. They can be structured in any form. They can be made to any type of entity. They only need to meet 3 requirements. First, they must advance a charitable purpose. And this is not just anything that we think of as charitable. It must meet a 501c3 Internal Revenue Code definition of charitable. Fortunately for you that are social enterprises, there's often an overlap between your social impact and that definition. So while it may seem like a big requirement or a hard hurdle to make, it really isn't so difficult for a social enterprise. Second, the investment must be on below market rate terms. The production of income or the appreciation of property may not be a significant purpose of the investment. The easiest way to really think about this is to ask yourself the question, would a for-profit investor make this investment on the same terms? If the answer is yes, then it's probably not below market. But if the answer is no, it probably is. And the third requirement is even easier to meet. No PRI funds may be used for electioneering or lobbying. You can't use the funds to attempt to influence legislation, and you can't use the funds to participate or intervene in the campaign of a candidate for political office. So with those 3 relatively easy requirements and all the flexibility that we could ever possibly want, these are really a wonderful tool and really good news for social enterprises. They're also good news, though, for individuals and other enterprises that desire to make charitable investments. First, they continue to have the same tax benefits as donations and grants. Individuals and businesses can take the deduction on their tax returns, and foundations can count them towards their charitable distribution requirement. Second, there's only upside. After all, we're used to just giving those dollars away. We use them once, we don't think about it anymore. Here, there's the possibility of more than that, and that is wonderful. And third, it leads to donation recycling. And this next chart really helps to show that. As you can see with grants, we only get to use our dollars once. But with a charitable investment, even with below 0% return, negative returns, you get to use some of the dollars more than once. And with modest returns, you're not only getting to reuse the dollars over and over and over, but you are also able to grow the pot of charitable dollars that you want to be doing good with. And so you can see how, as a charitable investor, you're really able to leverage your impact. And that is really, really exciting. So with this good news for the 2 groups that were experiencing the gap, I think the next question to ask yourself is, how does pursuing a PRI fit in with my fundraising plans? Here, it's important to know that a program-related investment can be used alone, but it can also be used alongside any other type of capital, whether that's equity, whether that's debt, gifts, grants, competition, awards, all of those. We've had many of our recipients use them with Kickstarter campaigns, loans or equity investments from friends and family, low favorable rate loans from state entities, as well as grants. And I think here I would just recommend that you step back as an entity and you're asking yourself, where are my current fundraising needs? What do I need capital for? How long will it keep me going? And the next stage and the next stage. Just sort of plot yourself looking forward. So what are my current and future capital needs? What stage am I at as an enterprise? Am I still in the concept development phase? Am I in the launch phase? Am I already in the growth phase? And there's nothing wrong with what phase that you're in. Program-related investment works in all those phases. The various other types of loans, debt, or equity capital available to you, though, varies with what phase you're in. And so you can begin stepping back and saying, this is the amount I need. This is the phase I'm at. How do those pieces fit together to lay a foundation today to use the capital that is most available to me to get my enterprise to the next stage, and then attract the capital that is most available to me then? And then we do see part of our role is helping support the recipient in being ready to lay that foundation for the next stage of attracting capital. Now, what should I expect when I'm looking at getting some of this PRI capital? Well, similar to raising any other type of capital, preparation is crucial. So you're going to want to have your business plans. You're going to want to have something that indicates that you've looked at the marketplace you're entering, the niche or the gap that you're filling. What are your products and services? How defined are they? How do they meet the needs that are out there? You're going to want to be providing some financial projections or pro forma financial statements. These are going to show how you're going to spend the capital that you're receiving and what's going to happen with the result of having spent those funds. You're also going to be thinking about your team. What are we really good at? What skills do we bring? And what skills do we not bring? And how are we going to fill those gaps? Again, in the short run and the long run. In the beginning, as a startup, of course, you can't hire a person to do everything that your enterprise needs, but there's a variety of ways that you can fill those needs. So kind of think through and prepare a nice description and package, a way of showing that you've thought about these things before you begin talking with the investors. Then again, just like any other type of capital, you're going to go through a due diligence process. And this really kind of hits on the same areas you're used to seeing in other places. There'll be commercial due diligence that's looking at how you're positioned within the marketplace, what are your drivers, what are your prospects. There's going to be the legal component of due diligence. Are you properly formed or incorporated? Who owns you? What are your contractual obligations? What assets do you own? And this is particularly important for you tech startups. Knowing that you own or have the rights to that intellectual property that provides the foundation for your entire enterprise and its future is really critical. So you'll want to have that buttoned down. It'll also include, but it won't amount to much if you're an early stage startup, whether or not you're compliant with the law and whether or not there's any litigation. And finally, in due diligence, there's always financial due diligence. The investor is going to want to validate your assumptions. Do the assumptions make sense? And have you thought through that if for the most important assumptions, something different happens, what are your plans for working around what I like to call those bumps in the road that we all run into? Next, your enterprise is going to need to meet the investor expectations, and every investor has them. Then we have three basic ones that we're looking for after we close. We want to see some basic governance principles. We would like to see that you have a board of directors or other governing body of at least 3 individuals, with one of those individuals being an independent third party, not one of the founders, not an employee, not a friend, not a family. You see, it's somebody who brings fresh set and eyes to your enterprise. And actually, that's a great way to fill one of your gaps. If you need a particular skill set, make that independent third party or that voice on your governing body a person in that professional arena, and then you kind of work in tandem in that regard. Next, Ben would like to see basic bookkeeping. We need to know that you have and you regularly use a double entry accounting software system and that you can regularly prepare financial statements. We know that at the beginning, the financial statements aren't going to be anything very robust or fancy, and that's okay. But we need to know that you can regularly account for your operations. And this is particularly important with program-related investments because depending on what type of entity you are, you will have expenditure responsibility requirements, which means you need to be able to show then or whoever provides the PRI that the funds you received were spent on items that pursue the charitable purpose that the PRI is intended to advance. And finally, we want to see some basic impact practices in place. It's difficult in the beginning to know what to measure with respect to your impact, but if you step back even in the beginning to say, what are the inputs I need to generate the outputs? And the outputs, by that I mean like the widgets you're going to be selling or the services you're going to be providing. And how do I track what those outputs are? How many clients have I served? How many widgets have I sold? Eventually, those outputs add up into that outcome or the impact you're trying to accomplish. And no, you won't be able to show that immediately. Usually it takes a while to actually be able to generate the impact. And we understand that, but we want to begin seeing that you have thinking in that regard. And finally, just like any other investment, there's going to be formal legal agreements. So now I'm super excited, very, very excited to turn our attention to giving you the opportunity to hear from a social enterprise that has actually received a program-related investment and see what she learned and discovered as part of that process. Again, I have Jamie Glover with me, co-founder and president of ASIA. Jamie is a graduate of Carleton College and spent the first 10 years of her career in advertising and marketing. She then left to pursue an MBA at the Carleton School of Management and to seek more impact-driven work. It was during her MBA experience that she met Fatimah Hussein and fell in love with the work that Fatimah was doing in providing modest activewear to Muslim women. Jamie was particularly attracted to this because she's an athlete herself. She played sports all the way through college and attributes much of her professional success to the leadership skills she developed while playing athletics. She has a passion for helping girls have access to those developmental opportunities and now leads operations and marketing for ASIA. Thank you for joining me, Jamie. Really quickly, before I jump in on the questions, I thought it might be helpful for those who are listening in to understand the basic terms of ASIA's PRI with Venn. And so for those of you who can see the screen there, it's a below market loan, it's unsecured. And so unlike much of the other equity or debt that you would be attracting at an early stage, this one has no collateral and no guarantee, and that's a pretty significant difference. It's a 5-year term. It's simple interest, not compound. The first 2 years at 2%, then 3, 4, and 5. Annual interest-only payments and a balloon principal at the end. And then in addition, ASIA issued warrants to Venn. So now Venn has an option to purchase shares during a 10-year window for up to 20% of the principal amount of the loan. So with that, by way of background, Jamie, why and how did ASIA land on raising a PRI, and how did it fit in with ASIA's other fundraising plans?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when ASIA connected with Venn, we had already completed a few phases of fundraising. We had gone through the Minnesota Cup process and won the social enterprise division, which got us our kind of launch capital to get our first inventory in place, to get out in the market, and helped us launch a Kickstarter campaign. And now at that point, we had kind of our feet under us. We had a business plan. We kind of had a direction we were going, but we really needed that next phase of capital to build our business. And so we evaluated both of what you had on the screen before. We evaluated the for-profit investor route and really dug into there and met with a variety of investors, including investors who were, said that they were focused on social enterprises and had found that their growth requirements and other kind of requirements were still too aggressive for us. They weren't where we were at as a business. And then we also had seriously considered flipping and becoming a nonprofit so that we could raise or just fundraise that way, because we had a lot of people telling us they loved what we were doing. We had a successful Kickstarter where we saw that the community at large was really supportive of our work. But Fatimah and I just, that wasn't interesting to us. We didn't want to build our business that way. So Venn really provided that sweet spot right in the middle that let us focus on our social mission and not, when we were exploring that for-profit investor route, market rate route, we'd kind of built out a whole business plan that would let us kind of achieve that business growth. But it made us put our social purpose on the back burner. It was kind of like, okay, well, we could grow our business this way, achieve the returns that these investors would need. And then maybe in 5 or 10 years, we could come back to our social purpose and still feel really good about it. But with Venn, we could really hone in and got a lot of great, like in partnership and discussions with Jeff, could really focus on that social purpose and attract the right kind of investor donors who wanted us to pursue that purpose, who wanted to put their dollars behind it, and whose terms aligned with kind of where we were as a business and what we were willing to agree to at that time. The last piece that I really loved about our kind of initial evaluation of the PRI process and working with Venn was we saw very quickly that both Venn and these donor investors were going to become partners with us and wholeheartedly wanted to see us succeed. And that came through in the terms and in the way that they were kind of agreeing to support us as a business.
Great. What you said there a little bit really resonated with me as far as sort of deciding authentically who ASSIA was as a business and finding investors that really supported you. And I think that's important for any startup. There's no right answer about who you are as a business, but making that match with your investors is really important, I think. Could you spend a few minutes just describing how you used the capital that was provided by the PRI?
Sure. Yeah. We used it on a whole host of things. We used it to build our inventory of products so that we could offer a wider array of sports jobs in this case, and appeal, to a broader customer base. It also allowed us to expand our sales outreach. We were able to go to a number of trade shows and meet with athletic directors and sports program directors, and do a lot of that early funnel sales discussions with our target audience who wasn't thinking about us, didn't even know that this was an option. Whereas before we had to really focus in on like the quick win so that we could get the revenue to move forward. Mm-hmm. So it let us expand our kind of sales funnel. And then it let us build our team and bring on some more capabilities that we desperately needed and grow with them.
Great. Mm-hmm. So what did you find challenging about this process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, the challenges I think are similar to whichever route you take for fundraising. It was, as a team of two at the time, feeling like we had the time to set aside to, meet with potential donor investors, pitch our business, do the due diligence. It's a time-intensive process, but I believe it is no matter which route you go, and for good reason. People are putting their dollars behind you and want to feel confident in your business. So that was, I'd say, the biggest challenge. The other was, to a lesser extent, with some of the donor investors that we spoke to, they weren't familiar with PRIs, and so part of our job was in those cases to kind of pull in Venn and educate them on this tool that they weren't previously using. So there was a bit of that and working through that. But that was with the donor investors that we attracted, that was less of a concern. Most of them were willing to give it a go and saw how streamlined it could be once they learned what it was.
Great. So what advice would you give another startup who was considering raising a PRI?
Mm-hmm. I would say what I would do first if you're considering a PRI is making a really comprehensive list of all the potential organizations or individuals who you might attract as a donor investor, and seeing if you believe you have a big enough pool who would be interested in this and interested in supporting your venture through this type of mechanism. We had done that at the beginning, and I'd say we got through our list pretty quickly and then had to step back and say, okay, who else should we reach out to? Because there's, it that takes time and work. And this is, you know, it's a unique situation. This mechanism is unique in that you're trying to find someone who is looking to make a charitable donation with the potential for upside. And it was just that process took some time. So think about who you could appeal to. And then I would just say, secondly, like really consider it as an option. We found it to be really successful, and we're really happy that we went this route as opposed to trying to pursue the for-profit investors. If you are really committed to your social purpose, and there are others who you believe will champion that with you and put money behind it, I'd say really look into this approach.
Great. I see a question from Kim has come in. Thanks, Kim. So can you see in the chat box there, Jamie, or I'll read it? The question is, Jamie, you had an early charitable program that allowed donors to buy and give equipment to girls. Can you describe how that worked?
Yeah, so we found through our Kickstarter that there was a lot of energy behind offering the ability for people to what we call sponsor an athlete. So essentially donate funds to us or give funds to us to then dole out sporting goods to girls in need. And so we continued that after the Kickstarter, and it's still available today on our website. The way it functions is essentially people can check out, they'll buy a sponsorship through our website. They don't get any, there's no like charitable tax deduction or anything in this regard because we are a for-profit organization. So, and then we are working directly with essentially youth sports organizations that have girls who can't afford their own equipment.
Wonderful. And now we have another question, and I'd like your thoughts on it. And then if I have anything further to add, I will. But Marianne has asked, would doing a Kickstarter be a way to test the waters for community interest in a potential PRI?
It validated it for us, I think, in a lot of ways. It made us feel really confident that there was support. That said, a Kickstarter is its own beast, and I don't know that would be required. It takes a lot to pull off a Kickstarter, and I guess I would say if you're looking to raise now, you might not get as much bang for your buck as starting with a PRI.
So with that kind of thinking, perhaps a PRI first and then a Kickstarter, or simultaneously?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about that much. It's with a Kickstarter, you're attracting individuals, and you're talking about $20 a pop, and so you have to fight for every $20 or whatever it might be. Whereas a PRI, you have the opportunity to go to organizations who would be willing to give, thousands as opposed to tens.
Right. I do know that we have worked with one entity that did try a Kickstarter before they were involved with us. And at that time, the community's imagination just was not captured by this particular product. And then things changed enough in the year and a half between when they tried it the first time, and then they tried it a second time at the exact same time that we were going through the PRI process with them, and it was wildly successful. So I'm not sure, and I'm not experienced in this at all, but it seems to me on the Kickstarter front, it surely could test the waters, Marianne. I think some of that I would try to get to a contact who had a lot of experience with Kickstarter campaigns and knew how to present it, so it was best situated for capturing the imagination of people. And you're right, it is a different dollar level of, it then does syndicate the program-related investment amongst donors, but the number of donors is significantly smaller than, say, a Kickstarter would be. Mm-hmm. So I just had noticed we have only 1 minute left, so maybe perhaps it's time to wrap it up. Jamie, I'll let you have the final word. What would be your final pitch to anybody who might be listening about this type of capital tool for their enterprise?
It worked great for ASIA. We were super fortunate to have connected with Ven when we did. We raised significant funds that we would not have been able to grow our business without. So definitely consider it. Connect with Ven. Think about who you could maybe connect with potential donors, engage initial interest, but certainly recommend it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie. And Michael, I did see your question come in real quickly. Jamie, we're going to just steal a little extra time. People can sign up if they feel a need. Foundations like Ven have many options for PRIs, but they all depend on investors wanting to direct their money that way. What was your pitch to your own investors? I think, Michael, how we handle it is we work in conjunction with the recipient. We have a network of other foundations, nonprofits, as well as individuals that will serve as charitable investors. And we know sort of the interest level of each one of them. So when a company like ASIA comes in, if that intersects with what their interests are, we just get the word out to them. Otherwise, we work in tandem to really build that network of charitable investors. It's really new. In some regards, for most individuals, they are not aware of their ability to make this kind of investment. Once they learn it, they get pretty excited about it. But that's what we're in the process of building right now. And so with that, I'll sign off. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jamie. And if there's any other questions, anybody on this, feel free. You can find me through the Ven Foundation website. I'm happy to answer questions at any time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.